Hey Rip City, this is Shaedon Sharpe, and you're listening to The Briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 174 of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino, a surprise somewhat edition of The Briefcase. Portland Trail Blazers settling all business on Sunday before the start of the regular season on Wednesday by reportedly signing Shaedon Sharpe and Toumani Camara to 4-year contract extensions, while also giving Javonte Cook the third and final two-way deal. We'll discuss all of those contracts and more on this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, rather than taking any unfinished business into the 25-26 season, Portland Trail Blazers decided just to get everything squared away on Sunday afternoon, reportedly signing both Shaedon Sharpe and Toumani Camara to 4-year contract extensions. Shaedon Sharpe's reportedly for $90 million over the next 4 seasons, while Toumani Camara's reportedly $82 million over the 4 seasons as well. Both players would be on their old contracts this season, with both those extensions kicking in for the 2026-27 season. By signing both Shaedon Sharpe and Toumani Camara, and heading Deni Avdija under contract through the 27-28 season, the Trailblazers have a wing rotation now that is good to very good and still improving, all of whom are still improving, all getting better, measuring at 6'6", 6'8", and 6'9", who are 22, 25, and 24 years old. That is a very solid rotation, very good age, very good sizes for a very solid shooting guard, small forward, power forward rotation. So doing a bit of rough math, those 3 players will combine to earn $56.1 million during the 2026-27 season. And if the salary cap for this season, which is roughly $154 million, stayed the same next season, those 3 players, very possibly your starting shooting guard, your starting small forward, and your starting power forward, will be making 36% of the cap, which is fantastic business. That is absolute value for 3 players who are very good now and still improving. And that's really to say nothing of how well all those players complement each other. In Shaedon, you have a talented scorer and with elite athleticism, absolutely NBA leading athleticism, who is just scratching the surface of what he can do on both sides of the ball. I think we view Shaedon as somewhat of a complete offensive player. He's still got so much room to grow on offense, and he's already getting so much better defensively, really starting to figure out what it takes to be an elite defender, a quality defender in the NBA. He's made strides in that area in preseason. I expect that to continue through the regular season. And in Toumani, you have a player who was just named second-team All-NBA in just his second season, who has also made significant strides on the offensive side of the ball. Already a very good shooter as it is, shot 38% from 3 last season, a guy who already has elite 3 and D potential, but a guy who at this point, I think, you really start to think beyond Toumani just being a 3 and D guy. You start to really think about him being a borderline all-star, all-NBA kind of guy, particularly when you already have earned an all-NBA defensive honor in just your second season. So to get both Toumani Camara and Shaedon Sharpe under contract for the next 4 years at a very reasonable average salary is great business for both the players and the team. Well, let's go ahead and get into a little more about each individual deal. Shams Charania of ESPN reporting that Trailblazers signed Shaedon Sharpe to that 4-year deal. Shaedon Sharpe's agent, Mike George at Clutch, confirmed the signing to Shams, so you can go ahead and pretty much assume that that is legit. There was a debate about whether or not the Trailblazers and Shaedon would come to an agreement or if he would hit restricted free agency. The deadline was Monday afternoon. And, you could have made an argument for both sides. I think for the Blazers, if they could get Shaedon at a reasonable average salary, I think that was absolutely their goal. With Shaedon, I think there's still times when they'd like to see more out of him. He also has had some injury issues, so I think for the team, you'd just like to maybe see a little bit more of it, a little more consistently. And then from Shaedon's side, you have a player who is very good as it is. It's just really, as I mentioned, scratching the surface of what he can do on both sides of the ball. And you could have played out this season and then maybe, gotten more if you had gone into restricted free agency, though I think we've seen that restricted free agency just is not what it used to be. And also, who's to say what happens this season? If you go into the season saying like, hey, I'm going to play for a contract going into next season, if you get injured, if the team doesn't play particularly well, any number of things can happen. So for Shaedon to lock in at 4 years, $90 million, I think that's a great price for everybody. I think that leaves everybody satisfied with that negotiation, and that's what you want in a negotiation. You don't necessarily want the team feeling like they're up against the wall and they have to sign you just because they have to. You don't want the player to feel like, they're taking less money and they're not getting what they deserve because, they signed the deal when they were younger. This is the kind of deal where by the end of it, I think both sides feel really good about it. And potentially, by the end of this deal, if Shaedon continues to improve, as I think a lot of us think he can, then it really starts to look like a good deal towards the end of that contract. But either way, I think everyone gets exactly what they want in that deal. Strong salary, still room to grow. You're getting paid for what you've done, but you're also getting paid for what you are hoped to do going forward. And that's what you want out of a long-term deal for a player coming off their rookie contract. You want them to feel like they're being rewarded for what they've already done, but you also want them to feel like there's still more room to grow and there's still reason and cause to go out there and really try to improve yourself and improve your game. So I really like that deal for both sides. I think initially the thought was that it would get done. I think as we got closer and closer to the Monday deadline, I think maybe there was some thinking that perhaps it would go into restricted free agency. But the team and Shaedon's side deciding that that wasn't necessary came together and figured out a deal. Reportedly got that signed on Sunday. Now Shaedon, a cornerstone of this organization for the foreseeable future. And again, at a deal and for a length that I think both sides can feel really good about. And that, when both sides feel like they got what they wanted, that's about as good as you're going to get in a negotiation. As for Toumani, Shams reporting that Camara signed a 4-year, $82 million contract, which was confirmed by his agent, David Petier, after securing himself as one of the Trailblazers' best young players in his first 2 seasons in Portland. According to Bobby Marks, basically 3 options for the Trailblazers with Toumani Camara's contract. They could either decline their team option and extend him now, which is what they did. They could either play out this season, then decline the team option and make him a restricted free agent, which according to Marks would give the Blazers the most flexibility, but also comes with the most risks. Really, restricted free agency, it's always a bit hard to tell how that's going to go. So a lot of times you'd rather just kind of avoid that, particularly if you can get a number that everyone feels good about, which obviously was the case for the Trailblazers. Or they could have exercised the team option and then extended him for 3 seasons starting in 2027-28. That seems like the worst possible option. Trailblazers taking what I would say is the safest and best option, declining that team option and then just extending Toumani now. That contract will start at the beginning of next season. Acquired via trade prior to the 2023-24 season after being selected by the Phoenix Suns with the 52nd overall pick of the 2023 draft, Camara quickly established himself in Portland as a multi-positional player who provides elite defense at multiple positions. He moved into the starting lineup less than a month into his rookie season and has pretty much been a fixture of Portland's best lineups ever since. That was at least until he had his rookie season ended prematurely by having one of his ribs broken, which also punctured a kidney. Toumani actually played for a quarter before actually getting subbed out of that game with a broken rib and a lacerated kidney. Just going to show how tough of a customer Toumani Camara is. Two also took a significant step his sophomore season, starting all 78 games he appeared in while averaging 11.3 points on 46% shooting from the field, 38% shooting from three, a 5 percentage point from his rookie season three-point shooting percentage, an important thing for a player like Toumani, and 72% shooting from the line, to go with 5.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and 1.5 steals in 32.7 minutes per game. But Toumani's value really goes beyond just the standard box score. I mean, he's already a pretty good standard box scorer anyways, but when you get a little deeper into the more advanced stats, that's where Toumani really starts to shine. Obviously, as many of you know, he drew 91 offensive fouls last season, which is the second most offensive fouls a player has drawn in a season since the NBA started counting that in 2023. Putting players in the box, as you well know, and he was one of 7 players last season who finished the year with at least 50 blocks and 100 steals. For his efforts, the Belgian was named Western Conference Defensive Player of the Month in February and was honored at the end of the season with second-team All-NBA honors, making him the first Trailblazer to get All-NBA defensive team honors since Theo Ratliff. Toumani, a guy who, again, brings elite defense and improving offensive player. I really feel like Toumani, I would say he has a long way to go offensively, but I think he's already there. Now he just needs to get the opportunities. He's got the confidence. He's now got the contract. Now he needs to go out there and establish himself. I think you're going to see a guy who has a much improved handle, mid-range game much improved finishing at the rim, already really improved a three-point shot, getting to 38% from three last season. If he get that to around 40% from three, which I think is very possible, he's going to get a lot of good looks this season with more talent on the team. I really think the sky's the limit for Toumani. And so to get him at 4 years, 82 million, I think that, again, same with Shaedon, a deal that I think both sides feel very good about. In Toumani, you got a guy who came in as a second round pick, really didn't even know if he was going to make a team necessarily after he left Dayton. And now he's got long-term financial stability with a 4 year deal at a very good average salary. And for the Blazers, you have a guy who you love, who is a fantastic locker room guy, a great personality, the exact kind of player you want in your organization. He's young in his NBA years, but he's a little bit older because he played 4 years in college. He brings kind of a maturity to your locker room, but also a playfulness. Like, people just love Toumani. He's a great guy, really down to earth. And you get a guy like Toumani, who's already an elite defensive player, who's going to continue to improve on both sides of the ball for 4 years, 84 million, which again, I think by time you get to the end of that contract, I think both sides are still going to feel really good about it. I think you look at that deal with that average salary and you say, yes, you are being rewarded for being a very good defensive player now, but we're also giving you some of this contract in the expectation that you're going to continue to improve and ascend in this league. And again, I think both of those contracts are really at just the right number of years to really make everyone from the player to the team to the agent feel like they're being valued. And I think that when you can do that in a contract negotiation, it just really sets your team up for success going forward. Because again, it's like when you have protracted kind of negative contract negotiations. Now, granted, it's a business, so people who are smart in this business don't take it personally. But sometimes people take it personally, even if you don't want to. And so to be able to get deals done that you feel very good about from both the organizational side and the player side is just fantastic business. So shout out to Joe Cronin and his staff. I think obviously, they could have let this ride on. They could have waited until, maybe some new voices in the room and giving their perspective on what they'd like to see happen. But going ahead and finishing business that needed to get solved and taken care of before the season started at numbers that everyone can feel really good about. So again, just some great pieces of business for the Trailblazers. And really, again, now you have a wing rotation between Shaedon and Toumani and Deni and Jeremy, where you just have a bunch of great multi-positional, multi-skilled players that all bring a little bit of something different. In Shaedon, obviously you have, offense and athleticism, and Toumani you have defense and athleticism and a mentality. In Deni, you kind of get that utility player that can do a little bit of everything, who also really plays with an edge. In Jeremy, you got a guy who's a slasher who gets to the free throw line. So they really have a lot of different options with that wing forward rotation now. And a lot of those guys under contract for multiple seasons going forward, really something you can kind of build on and plan on and build around. So, just a really good, a really good day of business for the Trailblazers to get all that stuff squared away before the start of the regular season. Again, you can go into the regular season with those things, but then you're always getting asked questions about it. It could be a distraction. It's certainly not helpful in any way, shape, or form. So to get that stuff squared away at numbers that everyone feels really good about, that's fantastic business. And finally, though it's not as long-term, Trailblazers also locking up Javonte Cook, who they waived a few days ago, giving him their third and final two-way contract. That also, according to ESPN, meaning that he will split time with the Trailblazers and the Remix next season. Cook, a 6'6", 185-pound guard, is coming off his third G League season in 2024-25, averaging 17 points, 5.0 rebounds, 2.9 assists, and 1.0 steals in 28.2 minutes per game for the Oklahoma City Blue. Cook spent the previous 2 seasons with the Iowa Wolves after playing collegiately at Mars Hill University and Winston-Salem State. Cook joined Sidy Cissoko and Caleb Love as players on two-way contracts for the Portland Trail Blazers in the upcoming 2025-26 season. Javonte was with the team all through training camp. He remained with the team even after they cut the other non-contract players, which always gave you an impression that he was probably the leader in the clubhouse in terms of getting that third and final two-way spot. I think the team probably waited to see, who shook out in terms of some of the players who also got cut from other teams to see if there was maybe someone that maybe fitted what they wanted to do better. But I think they were very comfortable with Javonte. They really liked what they saw out of him in training camp and in preseason and feel very good about signing him to their third three-way contract. So the Trailblazers now with 18 players under contract, 15 NBA contracts, 3 two-way contracts. That is the maximum contracts allowed in the NBA. So the Trailblazers now squared away going into the regular season, which, as I mentioned, once again starts on Wednesday versus the Timberwolves at Moda Center, 7 p.m. start on KUNP, Blazer Vision, and 6:20 a.m. Rip City Radio. And that will do it for this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, more discussion of these contract extensions and the start of the regular season on the next edition of The Blazers Balcony with Brooke Olsendam, which will record on Monday. So check out your podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, your podcatchers, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Be on the lookout for a new edition of The Blazers Balcony, which should be following up this edition of The Briefcase before too awful long. Also, editions of The Briefcase this week as the Trailblazers start their 2025-26 season on Wednesday versus the Timberwolves and on Friday versus the Warriors before heading out for a 3-game road trip to face the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Jazz. So until then, thanks so much for joining me. As always, I am Casey Holdahl. Go Blazers.